From KPRC2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
Well, the Houston Area Urban League has been in the business of helping people like they are in this case for 55 years. Founded in 1968 as an affiliate of the National Urban League, the organization's focused on housing, job issues, civil rights, voting, entrepreneurship, and much more to provide social services to disadvantaged people of all races, gender, age groups, and or disabilities. That's a big area of focus that's described as a part of the Urban League's purpose. Joining me this morning to talk about the Houston Area Urban League and its upcoming huge job of hosting the National Urban League Conference here in Houston, Judson Robinson III, the president and CEO of the Houston Area Urban League, and Eric Goody, the executive vice president of that organization. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning,
Good to see you. Hey, for those people who may not know about the Urban League, talk about what the focus is. I talked about a little bit about it, but just the name Urban League tends to kind of indicate that a lot of the issues that you deal with have to do with people in our urban settings.
Yeah, trying to really help black people in marginalized communities throughout the city and throughout the country to achieve economic stability. And we do that through the programs of education, of housing, of workforce, entrepreneurship, health. You know, those are kind of the cornerstones to ensure that everybody's got a successful life. If you get off to a good educational start, we help you get your first job. You go through college, you do well there, and you come back and start working somewhere, and the next thing you know, you're starting your business and, planning for generational wealth. And we believe we can do that if we have the support of and awareness of the programs that we do that we know that works and ensures that people are on, the roads to stability.
So, Eric, talk a little bit about some of the programs that you have that really are examples of this organization getting down to the very basic foundations of the community to help them get up with their own help and with the community support.
Certainly. So our holistic programs really focus on stabilization and then the opportunity for generational wealth, as Judson has indicated. We do so through assets that we have identified in education, so helping both the children and the parents to participate in the academic environment and to be successful. That includes mentoring and tutoring and then family engagement for capacity building so that they can support the child in achieving academic excellence.
You said something, you said generational wealth.
Yes, sir.
And that is it's a catch term for me because it is so important and it so often evades a lot of communities, does it not? And how do you go ahead and let them know the importance of what generational wealth is and how it can be impactful to them, not only now, but for long term?
Certainly. I mean, the opportunity to push down knowledge so that our children understand how to follow a pathway towards generational wealth, and then again, helping the families to understand what that looks like. Housing acquisition through our housing program. So first-time homebuyer education, post-home ownership, foreclosure prevention, mortgage modification, all of those things that help a family obtain and then maintain a home. Jobs, economics mobilization through job acquisition, job retention, occupational skills training in high growth, high demand jobs, a lot of trending in technology and urban energy, which is focused on renewable energies, EV and et cetera, entrepreneurship, so small business development, capacity building, access to capital, procurement, certifications, and then of course the Center for Social Justice and Education, which is an advocacy platform.
I would guess, Judson, that it must give you a great deal of pride when you and the programs that you have in place, when they impact people and people go that aha moment, when they come in and they realize things that you are helping them to focus on actually are beneficial in their lives.
Exactly. I mean, over the last 50 years, we know that 82,500 people have been placed in a job, and that puts them on their way. More than 500,000 people have come through our doors and benefited over the past 50 years. So we have a lot to be proud of, and we're continuing to try to evolve, as Eric mentioned, some of these great programs in technology, making sure that we're teaching people for the jobs of today and of the future. Working with our partners to ensure that the things that they're hiring for, we're in sync with and in tune with, planning to ensure that X number of people can be hired per year based upon our relationship and based upon the things that they're looking for in the trades that they have to offer. So it's really been a great relationship between our partners, be it corporate or even federal or the state government, and some of the programs that they're willing to help us fund and pay for to ensure that people are on their way. I mean, the taxpayer system, it pays into itself in the hopes that you get something back. And oftentimes, depending on your neighborhood or your zip code or family structure or whatever, you might not be able to have access to some of the things that others are able to access. And we want to shrink that equality gap, make sure there's greater equity. And that's how we do it at the Urban League, is through these programs and through advocacy. Eric mentioned the Center for Social Justice. I mean, that's a big deal.
Right.
Trying to ensure that people know, what are your rights? How do I access the political system?
Oh man, and you talk about the political system now, voting and the importance of voting, which has always been a priority. I mean, since the 60s especially, when the rights were fought for and gained. And now even more, even though there ebbs and flows in terms of people who get excited about voting, you've got a couple of initiatives that actually do help to kind of focus, let people understand the value of voting.
Absolutely. I mean, voter mobilization is really critical through our partner organizations. First, in helping people to understand, as Justin has indicated, the political process and how to be an advocate for themselves, their families, within the communities that they reside. So we've done things such as voter deputization. Through the Center for Social Justice, we talk about city, state, and national politics and how to engage with your legislators around those issues that affect yourself and or your family. And then, of course, just serving as a trusted voice. The National Urban League, over 100 years. Here in Houston, over 55 years. So we are a trusted voice, and the information that we impart into our communities, people, take that. And we really try to mitigate voter apathy. This political environment can cause people to not want to participate, but we really encourage them, helping them to understand really the obligation to exercise your civil liberty and to vote.
If you were to say one thing that Houston is in need of working on right now more than anything else, what would that area be? Is there any one, or is there a couple that you'd say, okay, this is something we really, I know all the things that you are focusing on as an organization, but is there something that we really got to work on that in Houston?
Yes, they are so interrelated, Cambrell. I mean, education is key, it's foundational.
Right.
If you don't have an education, you can't get a good job.
Right.
We're trying to train people with the types of jobs that are going to be out there. We have to make sure they're interested and wanting to participate in their own futures and take it seriously. So that ties to voting, because if you don't have the dollars to improve your educational system and to motivate people to, become whatever they're destined to become, that's a challenge. But it's just hard to put your finger on one thing, but certainly, we work in an environment downtown where we see the homeless population every day. So housing is a big deal. Making sure that people are able to have a humane existence, and there's lots of barriers that people encounter on their way to becoming in the situation they find themselves in. Some their own fault, some not. And so we're trying to make sure that we again focus on being good advocates, being good policy recommenders, ensuring that we have fair and equitable justice from the standpoint of housing, from the standpoint of jobs, from the standpoint of workforce inclusion. So, I mean, there's just as Eric mentioned, there's a holistic approach to these things. So it's important that the agency is strong and we're able to have intelligent voices speaking to these issues that are respected and have a historical content.
So since we're talking about the Urban League Conference this week, so how do the local Urban League offices interact with the national office, and how do you work together to have programs that are in synergy, if you will? Is there a method that goes on with that? Yeah,
it is. There are about 92 affiliates throughout the country. And we all work within their governance structure of what Urban League's a mission to do. And then the National Urban League has departments, much like we do. One of them really works to ensure that they are in partnership with the Department of Labor, HUD, Health and Human Services, and other departments whereby, again, there might be dollars available to help us in the trenches in these various cities to work to, again, eradicate the equality that might exist in the communities that we serve. So you might want to talk about the Veterans Program, or as Eric mentioned, some of the housing programs that we have, the workforce, and again, trying to ensure that the types of programs that we have are meeting today's needs. So trying to always kind of be on the swivel, on the pivot, to ensure that we're communicating with them and they're communicating with us.
So the National Urban League Conference is here in Houston this week. Talk about how big of a deal that is to have that conference here, because so much comes out of that national conference. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Talk a little bit about the value of having the conference here in Houston.
Well, the word that I've been using is epic. And what an amazing opportunity for Judson to serve as the host for this national convening. The conference has not been here since 1999. I think I am one of the few Urban League staff that was with the affiliate at that time. And so I know what that looks like. I know what it feels like to have our colleagues from across the country, our corporate sponsors, our political stakeholders and partners to convene. It is such a beautiful representation of what the Urban League mission looks like, the movement. And then we bring in individuals that talk about all of the core content areas that we provide services in. And then, of course, Judson has a tremendous opportunity to engage with his peers, and then also those that can have an influence, funding on the programmatic areas that we serve. But there's one thing that I really want to focus on. You talked about urban earlier. And so, Judson's vision has been to decentralize our services. So historically, it was the urban communities. But we know today that people of color, blacks, live throughout Harris County. And so his vision of a hub and spoke model is what has come to life and how we operate today. So we have a centralized location at our downtown office, our secondary location in the southeast part of Houston at Griggs, and then we have Angel Lane, which is in the Hiram Clark area. Through partner organizations like the United Way, we co-locate in Fort Bend and Bay Area. With our partners at the City of Houston, we co-locate in Acres Homes, Cashmere, and et cetera. So taking the services into those communities where people need it, where you mitigate mobility issues because it's right there.
Right.
And then we push out into other areas as far as Galveston, Liberty County, and et cetera. So it's not just in urban communities. We really take the services to where people need it the most through that hub and spoke model.
That's a great, glad you went back to that and talk about that, because it does spread out. I'm talking about the national conference here. I looked at some of the forums that are taking place this week, and it is really eye-opening. Here are just a few of the titles. Beyond Crime and Punishment, The Path to Restorative Justice. Black Men Thrive, Moving Beyond Survival. Fresh Path to Financial Empowerment. Black Rights, Advocacy Strategies, and Best Practices for a New Area. All of these forums, man, I want to go to each and every one of them. Right? That's right.
They're all the same time.
What's the goal, I guess, would be that you have those forums, you bring the thinking people together, and hopefully you come out of it with some sort of answers or a strategy to kind of solve some of the issues that those forums are entitled?
Yeah, you're spot on. As Eric mentioned, our funders will be there. Our sponsors, our supporters, the Urban League will be there. And so it's a big meeting to discuss best practices. What can we do in these spaces that you just talked about to ensure that moving forward, we're doing something progressive to eradicate some of the challenges and problems that we have in communities of color. Looking at the next 55 years, as we look back on the past 55 years, how do we remain relevant? How do we ensure that these discussions that we're going to have here at the Houston conference continue beyond when the conference leaves? We have to move to a more intellectual discussion about some of these major challenges that we're having in communities of color, because they impact everyone, right? So as we continue to do great work in education, housing, workforce, we want to elevate the discussion with our partners, just as we'll do at this conference, on an ongoing basis about here's a percentage or a population that's being impacted, and here's the projection that we're seeing. How do we change the direction, alter it, ensure that it's moving up and not backwards? How do we do those things in a partnership fashion? So again, it's going to take a lot of communication, an ongoing discussion, moving the next 55 years forward to ensure that we're in greater intense partnership with those who support the work we do.
One of the things that I always look forward to coming out of the conference, wherever it is the state of Black America. That's a report that comes out every year. Your president and CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morial, has recently been much more, you can see, you associate that with him. We talked about the state of Black America. How is that put together? My understanding is that a lot of what goes into the State of Black America is what is gleaned from the affiliates from around the country in determining what's going on. How is that report put together? Do you have any insights you can tell us now before it comes out? I know it's coming out on Wednesday or Tuesday, but
yeah, there's still great disparities, unfortunately.
Okay.
So that part hadn't changed. But there's lots of census data that we can collect from the Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, and others that we can then glean to understand how did Black people align in comparison with our white counterparts. Are we at 100% of employment? If we assume that there is a number that says our Anglo partners are at X percent. And then what are African Americans and Hispanics? And how do we ensure that we are, again, moving the needle in the right direction? We know that over the past, since the 80s, we've doubled the Hispanic population in Houston. We know that 1 in every 5 kids below the age of 5 are minority. So we have to take that data that we see approaching and ensure that we're realistic about where we are today, so that we can deal with some of the challenges that we're going to face in the future. So it's public sources.
You talked, Eric, about you've been in the Urban League for quite some time here. Do you get a sense that things are, obviously we have ebbs and flows. What do you sense where we are now compared to where we were last year, the year before? Do you sense any kind of improvement, or are we still at a point where we really have to double down and make sure that we have to work harder? I'm from a generation, you guys know, how old I am, so I'm from a generation that some of you, I think you're the young one, but where it's like we were always taught, you got to work twice as hard to get ahead, to even get close. Are we still in that kind of environment?
Cambrell, it's not really either or, it's really both. We have to continue to be so intentional in ensuring that we not really work harder, but work smarter. We have to show up in a very intentional way. I think some of the titles of the plenary sessions really speak to a pathway and a movement. And so that's where we are as the Urban League. It's really about making sure that we're tapping into the momentum that is historical, but looking forward. One of the things that Judson, I, and the staff always talk about is culture. And historically, when you talked about culture in the Urban League, it was ethnicity. But culture now has been redefined. So it is a generational dynamic. It is how people are feeling about all of these issues that affect themselves and their families. And how does the Urban League kind of reframe the narrative and the communication to ensure that we're speaking to them, it is relevant, and then they take full advantage of all of the opportunities that are represented. But again, we have to continue to work and to really dig deep in all of those issues, as Justice has indicated, that continue to plague our communities, but also take a look forward. There's been so much progress in many, many areas, a lot of success within the Black, brown, and other communities of color. And so we have to celebrate that, but while we do not forget those things that have hampered us historically. Let's
talk about the conference itself. Is it something that all of us can go to? I know that there's some sessions, some areas that we can't go. I can't hang out with all the CEOs. I can't do that. But what areas are open to the public, and how can we get involved if we want to come out and be a part of it?
Well, I think the greatest opportunity will be on that Saturday when we have Community Day. Community Day will be just a myriad of different opportunities, from the very young to the more seasoned population here in our city. But
I like the way you said that.
I was thinking about us.
We're seasoned.
I was thinking about us. But something for everyone. If it's the backpack giveaways filled with school supplies, or if you're trying to learn how to start your business, if you want to do the TikTok dance contest, you can do that. There's just lots of going on. There'll be a college fair. There'll be opportunities to be hired on the spot. Just a lot of different things will be taking place in that day. It's from 10 to 5 all day. I encourage everyone to go to www.hall.org and take a look at what all is going to be taking place that day. But, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. As Justin indicated, a recruitment lounge with on-site job opportunities, interviewing, a she space, a he space, a kids corner with what's Gracie's Corner.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So those founders will be there. There's a tech space where we're talking about technology. You know, technology is really an asset for our community, not just in terms of employment, but also just how we really embrace technology, all the discussions around AI, and utilizing it as a resource to move forward. So it's going to be
small business.
Oh,
forget about that.
This is all community
Pitch competition, $10,000.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, say that part again.
$10,000 will be awarded that day.
Yes, sir.
For
Small Business Matters Summit, which is at the Marriott Marquis, running concurrent to the Community Day activations at the George R. Brown.
So that website, all the information we need is at that website.
Correct.
What was it again?
Correct. It is www.hall.org. And importantly, you'll also see who the sponsors are too, because none of this is possible without the Centerpoints and the Halliburtons of the world. Geico is giving away, I think, 2 cars that day. I mean, people really step up in this community, and I hope that everybody goes to the website so they can see who these folks are, the Shell Oils. I mean, folks who've been with us for years.
Right.
And again, these are the partners we'll be having these deep dive discussions with moving forward, as we have in the past. But again, as Eric mentioned, more intentional to really ensure that, you know, their goals are being met and our goals are being met so that the community can benefit.
This whole thing is going to be extraordinary. The opportunity for people to come out, that the website is going to be instructional for people to find out, okay, what's available to me, what's not, and what
all the times and locations.
All the times and everything.
That's right.
And I'm going to put that information on my website too, the Houston Newsmakers website, so you can go to that and get all the information you can. But before I go, I want you to take a look at this picture we're going to put up here, and I want you to tell me what does it represent to you? What does that remind you of?
Yeah. People say that's my grandfather or that's me, but it's not. That's Whitney Young.
Yep.
Whitney was one of our most charismatic leaders of the Urban League movement. The folks beside him are Houstonians who were fundamental to the starting of our organization. I happened to go to college with the young lady on the left's daughter. I mean, so this is Houston. This is who we are. My grandfather had the opportunity to be part of the founding board of the Houston Area Urban League back in 1968. And I remember many of the peers that he worked with, and some of the folks that, you know, their work is still around today. Gerald Hines and the Galleria. Gerald was concerned about what was happening in the 60s in Houston and thought it was important to work with the black community to build a better city, to protect it, to protect its assets, to protect its people, to work together for something better. And that's what we continue to try to do today.
Well, I saw the picture, and I remember when I was growing up, I used to see Whitney's picture in a lot of different places, you know, remembering what he stood for, and the Urban League, the first time that I ever knew what it was all about was associated with pictures like that. So I saw that and I said, okay.
But he fought to ensure that we got jobs in places like post offices. Right? I mean, those federal opportunities began to open up. And if you go to most post offices today, you'll see generations of that original people still working there to this day.
So what are your thoughts when you hear people say, you know what, everything's where it needs to be now. We don't need any more programs to help people. Yeah, we don't need that because we see that. There are pockets of that. When you talk about culture, that's where some of that culture stuff comes in. There are people who say, everything's fine. We don't need to do any program. We don't need any programmatic kind of things. We don't need to put any money toward any programs that help these people. Those are the same people who have a problem with the word equality. That is an issue there. What do you say to those who make that argument?
You know,
I got time.
Yeah, Judson has a phrase that he utilizes quite frequently, and it's always what's next. And so there's always the what's next in all of the areas that we provide services. Society evolves. Programs have to change. They have to provide the foundational aspect, but they also have to have, again, that forward look. And looking at emerging trends, emerging jobs, housing as an example. The whole housing dynamic flipped in terms of affordability, so there's a new housing acquisition model. And so all of those things are organic. They continue to change. And so we'll never be, or rather, I don't want to use the word never, but it will be a challenge for us to arrive at a point where these programs, these activations, this engagement is no longer needed. It will continue to evolve, and the Urban League as a brand, I'm hopeful, will continue to evolve along with it, and will continue to be a trusted voice, and a champion for those that we serve in our communities.
And in order to be effective, I'm guessing that it needs to be an organization that's received with a high level of value to what comes out of your conference. That
Agreed.
Different components, right, left, blue, red, they need to receive your information and know that it's coming from solid value information that's not made up out of pie in the sky. It's actually stats that you're dealing with.
Right. And in addition to that, making sure that people who are at the table that lead these organizations, their hairlines aren't receding, their hair, gray. We're trying to get there too. Ensuring that we've got some new staff on board that are very talented. They're probably half my age, which is great because they bring a fresh perspective.
Absolutely.
And new ideas of how do we meet people where they are. There's lots of ways, I always say, it's lots of ways to get to right. It doesn't have to be my way to get to right. It could be your way. It could be a combination of the two. Mm-hmm. We can get there. We had a group from the Harvard business alums to come to town who are actually in school as well as the alums to come to town and talk about, the future of work, the future of housing, the future of education, and how through their lens does that look and what can we do, what new methodologies can we utilize to ensure that people are running towards success. Because perhaps the old ways that used to work in a different day don't work anymore. Doesn't mean that people still aren't willing. It just means the approach has to be different. So, as Eric said, trying to really look at what's next is important. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're still here 55 years later.
How would you suggest people could get involved? I mean, clearly you're an organization that you have a staff, but you couldn't do what you do if it were not for people who volunteer and come up and say, I want to be a part of what you're doing. What did you suggest?
I think that's the most exciting part of our structure. Not only do we have the Urban League worker bees, Eric and I, helping to lead and make sure the programs are doing what they're supposed to do every day, but we also have the volunteer auxiliaries. We have the young professionals, which are our 20 to 40-year-olds, who are working in the space of volunteerism as it relates to people of color, things that they need, networking with each other, ensuring that they're properly prepared for their own success. Then we have the Guild. And the Guild is, again, the seasoned folks that work within our auxiliary structure as well. And so they're thinking about and talking about, how do we avoid diabetes? How do we ensure that our parents have proper aging in place opportunities? All those things that investing, retirement, all those things that we want to talk about and advocate for, we have them in those two auxiliary organizations that allow us to focus on the work and allow them to help us keep us fresh with what are the emerging things that are important to those two very important demographics.
And I'm guessing that all of that information is available on the website. I'm just taking a stretch. I bet it is.
Once again, www.hall.org. It is it's been a great opportunity for people to plug in and get ready.
One of my baby daughter who lives in Louisville now, one of the first things she did when she got to Louisville, she got involved in the Urban League Young Professionals Organization. And I remember the first time I met Tiffany Thomas, she was with the Urban League Young Professionals. So now she's a council member and doing well. So Urban League has always been one of my favorite organizations, and I'm glad that you took the time out in this very busy time when you're hosting leaders from across the nation in this great city of Houston. So good luck on the week ahead, and hopefully at the end of this, we'll take some of the things that come out of it, and you'll come back and we can talk about how you're implementing them and what kind of things we need to do.
Well, we hope that you'll join us in that discussion. As you bring together thought leaders such as yourself and
absolutely.
Others. We want you to be a part of that.
I'll be there, absolutely. Anything you need, I'll be there.
Thank you.
Judson Robinson, President and CEO of the Houston Area Urban League, and Eric Goody, the Executive Vice President. Thank you. Good luck to the conference and beyond. This has been a very special edition of Houston Newsmakers. Share this with everyone you know, and of course it will be on the Newsmakers page on click2houston.com.